Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. It was March 2019. A scheduled maintenance was underway at the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library of Yale University. In the climate-controlled archive section of the library, conservation specialist Eliza Morell noticed microscopic fibers detaching along the edges of the Voynich manuscript's pages. To prevent further damage to the book, a restoration team was called in. During vacuum cleaning, a UV light scan was performed. In the lower left corner of page 57, a mark invisible to the naked eye drew attention. It appeared to be a small fingerprint, likely the left thumb. As required by procedure, Eliza digitally documented the finding and reported it to the central office. The mark might have been ink residue or skin oil, but for the first time there was interest in investigating if it could be something more. Due to the potential significance of the discovery, the library administration consulted an external expert. Dr. Alice Tremblay from the University of Montreal in Canada, an expert in forensic archaeology and paleographic biomarkers, was contacted. She had previously worked on ancient documents in the Vatican archives in Rome and extracted DNA from dried ink traces in Egypt. Upon receiving Yale's invitation, she arrived in New Haven within 3 days. Her initial examination was not on the manuscript itself, but on scanned and filtered images. The shape of the mark was unusual. It didn't resemble a typical ink smudge, but looked like it had been left with deliberate pressure. Furthermore, the sharpness of the fingerprint suggested it wasn't fresh, but neither had it degraded over time. The fine calcium deposits on the page hadn't dissolved in the oily layer of the mark, indicating that the hand which left the print was quite clean, yet probably damp or moist during writing. Subsequently, historical records accompanying the book were reviewed again. Documents showed that Georg Berisch, known as the manuscript's first owner, had attempted to decipher it in the 17th century. However, the fingerprint did not date to that era. It belonged to an earlier period, specifically between 1404 and 1438, as determined by carbon dating. Using modern technology, Alice analyzed the protein residues left on the page. The results were striking. Keratin proteins specific to human skin were found in the mark. This was the first strong scientific evidence supporting the possibility that the fingerprint was from the 15th century. What made it even more intriguing was a tiny writing anomaly located in the same area as the print. This symbol, differing by mere millimeters from the others, didn't resemble typical scribal corrections. Instead, it seemed like a deliberate deviation, as if part of a cipher system. Alice recalled seeing similar symbols in a few documents she had encountered in Italy. Notably, very similar figures appeared in notes by an unidentified alchemist dated around 1430. This resemblance led to the hypothesis that the Voynich manuscript might not be a singular book, but part of a broader knowledge network. That night, Alice wrote a single sentence at the top of her lab notes. "This mark is not just a touch, it may be the first link in a chain." And when morning came, the pages of the manuscript were opened once more. It was no longer merely a riddle to be solved. It had become a silent witness to the unseen past. While continuing her research at Yale University, Alice also began examining archival documents related to the manuscript. In a special, undigitized, vault of the Voynich Library, there were handwritten letters and purchase records belonging to Wilfrid Voynich. These were mostly short notes written in Latin, Polish, and English, undated, but one in particular stood out. A yellowed letter dated 1917, written in black ink, with no listed address. The letter was addressed to an unnamed person whom Voynich referred to as my collector friend. One phrase among the lines stood out: Objectum in chista rubra serica, Latin for the object in the red velvet box. The text was vague, but Voynich wrote that he had found complementary pieces along with the manuscript, though he had to leave one of them behind during a migration in Poland. Alice examined the letter with a Latin expert historian. The mention of migration likely referred to the passage from Europe to England during World War I. Ambiguous. References like old acquaintances in Poland and beneath the monastery offered subtle clues to the possible location. Alice began investigating old Jesuit structures based on the phrase Societas Iesu found in the letter. Before long, she discovered records of a 16th-century Jesuit monastery located south of Krakow, near Wieliczka. It had been seized during the Nazi occupation in the 1940s and was partially destroyed during the Soviet era. However, records still mentioned the existence of a cellar. After obtaining the necessary permits, Alice visited the site with a local guide and a museum archaeologist. As they descended into the monastery's stone basement, the air was damp and filled with the scent of mold embedded in the stone walls. A crack in the back wall of the cellar indicated that the bricks had been added later. After a small authorized excavation, a box measuring approximately 40 x 30 centimeters was uncovered, covered in burgundy velvet with rusted iron hinges. There were no inscriptions on it. However, the lock was a rare rotary mechanism associated with alchemists of the era. When opened, a strong odor of tobacco and mold filled the air. Inside the box was only a single item, a narrow and long manuscript, no thicker than a few millimeters. The material resembled the same type of vellum, thin calfskin, used in the Voynich manuscript. The writing and illustrations on it were unfamiliar, but this time, the text did not flow in straight lines. It progressed in a spiral, cyclical structure. At the center was a celestial-like symbol, an 8-pointed star surrounded by planet-like symbols arranged in a circular formation. Between the lines of text were short phrases aligned with these symbols. According to expert opinion, it was a poem, but one composed in conjunction with astronomical cycles. As Alice examined the page closely, she noticed that the words were placed according to the alignment of stars, and some lines only became visible under certain lighting. Back in the lab, spectroscopy tests revealed trace amounts of ground lapis lazuli pigment in the ink. This suggested that the text functioned not just symbolically, but visually, like a celestial map. What made it even more intriguing was this. Some of the symbols in the poem matched precisely with the symbol discovered near the fingerprint in the manuscript's earlier analysis. This box was not just a complementary piece to the manuscript, it was likely its key. Alice wrote another single sentence in her notebook. If this box is opened, the sky will begin to speak in silence. And with that sentence, a new question emerged. Where was the place indicated by the alignment of the stars? On her way back from Krakow, Alice examined the poem again and again. The 8-pointed star at the center of the spiral layout was not just symbolic, it was functional. Each arm corresponded to a planetary symbol, and each symbol matched certain parts of the poem. This circular arrangement was not fixed on a flat plane, but seemed to be part of a system rotating through time. Calculations revealed that the poem pointed to specific celestial alignments. With the help of astronomical software, the planetary positions described in the poem were matched with calendar dates. At least 5 of these alignments were visible in the skies over Italy. Retrospective calculations showed that similar alignments had occurred in the years 1418, 1583, 1917, and 2019. What caught Alice's attention was the meaningful correlation between these dates and the manuscript's known appearances or movements. One Latin phrase in the poem was particularly thought-provoking. In octo fenestris, caeli verbum occultatur. In 8 windows, the word of the sky is hidden. This line led Alice to the Monte Mario area near Rome. There stood the structure where the Vatican's early astronomical center, Spicola Vaticana, had first been established. Beside the main building was an old, abandoned observatory closed in the 19th century. Although the structure was not officially preserved, limited access was possible. Through her connections, Alice obtained a temporary academic permit to enter. Inside, it was dim, dusty, and silent. A rusted metal lamp hanging from the ceiling cast flickering light onto the damp stone walls. In the main chamber of the observatory, 8 narrow windows were evenly spaced along the circular walls. From the outside, they appeared meaningless, but from the inside, each one was aligned with a telescope-like system. Alice examined the alignments one by one using the ancient bronze measuring instruments fixed to the stone floor. Each window faced a different astronomical coordinate. Polaris, Sirius, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. All of them perfectly matched the symbols in the poem. Small traces of writing on the walls were nearly erased, but infrared photography revealed symbols on them. Characters similar to those in the Voynich script were arranged in a cyclical order along the wall. The observatory seemed like a sky machine that would decode the poem. Alice decided to spend the night there. She lit an old cast-iron stove to bring some warmth into the room. The sky was completely clear. At 4:12 a.m., moonlight, reflecting through window 5, directly illuminated the poem. Just at that moment, something unexpected happened. Some lines in the text slowly began to become transparent. It was as if the ink was not erasing from the paper, but transforming into something else under the light. The words didn't shift, but the symbols inside began to overlap with new letters from the underlying layer. Alice suspected that there was a photosensitive substance in the ink. This technique, rarely encountered before, was referred to by some alchemists as hidden layer writing, meaning the text only revealed its true meaning when under the correct celestial alignment. Alice took notes on the window numbers, alignment, angles, and the newly revealed letters. The emerging message was a fragmented sentence. Under the red crescent, the third door will open. However, this presented a new problem. What was the red crescent? Where was the third door? While leaning against the stone wall of the observatory, Alice had unknowingly entered a loop. The Voynich manuscript was no longer just a mysterious book. It had become a mechanism that worked through time. Every symbol was not just written to be read, but to be lived. While Alice continued her research in Rome, the research team at Yale University was working on the high-resolution photos she had sent, particularly the images documenting the transparency process that occurred in the observatory, had sparked a debate among neuroscientists and physicists in the lab. The text's transformation under specific light and temperature combinations showed not just chemical, but dynamic behavior. Dr. Kevin Wu noticed that under thermal imaging, certain parts of the text exhibited microscopic expansions. The ink didn't stay still. It expanded and contracted with temperature changes. This caused the letters to change their positions or shapes from time to time. Moreover, these changes weren't random. They repeated at regular intervals. When Wu plotted the text behavior on a graph, the resulting waveform was astonishing, a pulse-like rhythm. What was even more intriguing was that sections Alice touched with her finger directly reacted. A light touch would affect the tone of the letters about 20 seconds later. The writing seemed to hold a subtle memory of the touch. No classical technology from the 15th century seemed plausible to explain this phenomenon. Dr. Wu took things a step further by examining a small sample of the page under an atomic force microscope. The results were surprising. What they had thought was paper was actually a complex pattern of organic fibers, unlike any plant-based paper or animal parchment found in nature. The fibers seemed as if they were programmed to carry information. Each fiber's tip reflected light at different frequencies. This showed that the text was not only readable but could be felt. When these findings in the lab were combined with Alice's experience in Rome regarding the poem, the possibility emerged that the Voynich manuscript was not just a book, but likely a part of a functional device. Dr. Wu's words echoed within the team. This thing was not written to convey information. This thing was written to work. But like any device, it needed something else to function properly. Some sections of the manuscript were clearly unfinished, seemingly corresponding to other sections. It was as if half of a sentence was here, and the other half was somewhere else. Additionally, some symbols were marked with a recurring key-shaped icon. At this point, it was concluded that the poem Alice had retrieved from the velvet box in Krakow was not a complementary key to the manuscript, but rather just a warning. The device needed a second text to be activated, perhaps a text written in the same language with the same biological structure, but yet to be discovered. And this second text had never been cataloged, recorded in any museum, or found in academic databases until now. In the last note sent to Alice, Dr. Wu had written only 2 words: missing piece. Where could this missing piece be? More importantly, if the first text was alive, could the other one still be alive as well? The morning in Florence greeted Alice with a foggy yet peaceful day. She now conducted her research not through classical sources, but through digitized archive systems, using AI-assisted document scanning tools to perform pattern scans between thousands of pages in minutes. While researching encrypted writing samples from the 16th century among the Medici family's private collections, a striking match appeared. A writing system that directly corresponded to approximately 40% of the characters in the Voynich manuscript. But it belonged to only one document. A request for access to the document was sent. However, the response was unexpected. The document is not available in our archive. It was stolen in 1972. Alice began examining the theft records and the people who had worked on this document most recently. The name was still noted in the physical archive ledger, written in fine handwriting. Professor Dr. Cemal Kara, 1971 visiting researcher. He was a Turkish scientist. At the time, he had been involved in a study on cryptographic texts in the Ottoman Empire. His presence in Florence at the time of the theft drew attention, but due to a lack of evidence, no action had been taken against him. Afterward, he withdrew from the academic world, leaving behind only a few scattered papers. Alice made a quick decision and flew to Istanbul. Her intuition told her this step was not a coincidence. Finding Cemal Kara wasn't difficult. He was retired from Boğaziçi University and now lived in the basement of an old mansion overlooking the sea in Üsküdar. Once a library, his room was now filled with books up to the ceiling. Despite his age, his voice remained clear. When Alice introduced herself, Kara nodded silently. Then he said, "No one has asked me about this name in 35 years. Voynich." Kara began to explain. In 1971, while working in the Medici archives in Florence, he had focused not only on the content of the writing, but also on its formal structure. Some of the letters resembled old hieroglyphic ciphering methods used in Arabic calligraphy. At that time, among the documents taken from an Ottoman chest brought to Florence, he had found a small parchment. It contained an alphabet sequence that resembled the Voynich language but was simpler and had a shorter structure. However, shortly after he started studying it, his room in Florence was broken into, the documents were stolen, and his notes were scattered. He had reported it to the police, but nothing had come of it. "But I'll never forget that alphabet. Because I didn't just see it, I memorized it," Kara said, pointing to his forehead. Alice was both excited and cautious at what she heard. Kara thought for a moment, then took a yellowed notebook from the shelf. He opened the page and showed strange symbols written in ink. They had similar structures to the Voynich alphabet, but were written with more systematic, mathematical arrangements. And Kara slowly wrote a single word in Alice's notebook: Nabukra. When Alice saw the word, the first thing that crossed her mind was that it wasn't a name, but a command or a code. Kara shook his head and explained. This word was the most repeated word in that document. Each time it was surrounded by different symbols. It was like the starting word of a system, a trigger. Perhaps this is the command that activates the writing. Alice's mind raced, competing with the data from Yale. Could the word Nabukra cause a reaction if tested on the pulsating areas of the manuscript? Or was this word pointing to the hidden location of the second text? Kara quietly added, "I couldn't access that document, but years later someone came to me. He was carrying a writing similar to my parchment. He was a strange man. I still can't remember his face. But the symbols that came out of his pocket, they were exactly the same. I think that document is still in someone's hands. Nabukra." Everything Alice knew about the power of words was being tested with this word. As soon as she returned from Istanbul, she locked herself in the security lab at Yale. The high-resolution scans of the manuscript were examined repeatedly under thermal and ultraviolet light. The results revealed much more than anticipated. The word Nabukra appeared not just once in the manuscript, but in 15 different ways across different sections. However, each time it was written with different symbols. These versions, similar yet never identical, showed Alice a striking truth. The Voynich manuscript was not encrypted according to a single reading system, but according to different readers. It was like a personalized text. The information shifted according to the reader's approach, even their mental structure. Alice had felt this for the first time at the observatory, but now she had scientific proof. The manuscript was being rewritten according to the reader. After conducting tests with Dr. Wu and his team using different light frequencies, temperatures, and chemical vapors, certain sections of the text began to form meaningful sentences for the first time. The first line Alice read was, "Plant, sky, and body. The three are one. When the moon shifts, the root withers. So does the heart." This first meaningful passage proved that the content of the manuscript was not just made up of mysterious drawings, but offered a type of holistic information system. The following lines described how botanical components synchronized with astronomical cycles and explained the connection between human biology and universal rhythm. This information was more in line with modern botanical knowledge, biological, frequency theory, and even quantum biology. In the medical sections it read, "The heart rhythm is determined by the moon, the kidneys by Mars. Healing lies in alignment. It is not words, but silence that heals." However, the part that drew Alice's greatest attention was near the end of the text, where almost erased, but visible under special ultraviolet light, was this warning: "The mind of the one who fully decodes this information cannot be preserved, for the truth is too silent for the human mind to bear." As Alice read this line, she was filled with an inexplicable sense of unease. This sentence seemed not just to be a philosophical warning, but a reflection of an actual experience. It was as though someone had fully decoded this manuscript before, and that person had lost their mind. Now she had to make a choice, reveal the information or protect it. Alice made her decision. She backed up all the digital copies of the manuscript onto a military-grade encrypted data server. She had the original text secured with a special seal in the Rare Books Department of Yale University. The information released to the outside world was simply this: a rare text showing mechanical and biological responses, partially analyzed. Its content has not been fully analyzed, but Alice and a few others knew the truth. The Voynich manuscript was no longer just a historical curiosity, but a carrier of information that pushed the limits of the human mind. And Alice never forgot that last line. The truth is too silent for the human mind to bear. That was why she didn't speak. She only waited. Perhaps one day another reader, another Nabokov,